Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. So we do have another controversy to talk about today, this time regarding PlayStation on making a controversial decision even more controversial. Yeah, they somehow managed to do this in a bit of a surprise move, and fans are not particularly happy, so we're going to talk about that one later on in the video. And then also, there's a lot of speculation about the Nintendo Switch right now and some supposed leaks. I don't know if I'd really call these leaks per se, but nonetheless, there is one thing that's interesting here that might at least give fans a glimmer of hope, so we'll cover that one as well. As always though, if you are new to the channel, make sure to hit that bell notification, subscribe, and like button. It does help out the channel a ton, and I greatly appreciate it. But other than that, let's just go and jump right into things, starting off with the Xbox Indie event once again. I was in a bit of a situation yesterday where I really couldn't talk about every single game at this ID at Xbox event, so I mainly focused on the Xbox Game Pass games, but here I thought I'd go back and talk about some of the other games that was announced that wasn't for Xbox Game Pass, because there was actually some pretty interesting games here. They did reveal an additional 7 games here, a few of which I think is really interesting, but let's just kind of go over all of these real quick. The first of which is Lost Islands, which is this tactical RPG, and it is set for a Q3 2022 release. If you do like tactical games such as Fire Emblems as an example, this one might be worth keeping an eye on. Now, they also revealed gameplay for Artifacts of Chaos, which in terms of visual art style, this is a very, very unique looking game. Though in terms of its gameplay, I'm not exactly sold on it just yet. It is being described as you have to master different types of martial arts based combat, but it's the camera angle in specific. I'm not exactly sold on that, but still, it does look like a very unique looking game. So if you like that one, they are aiming for a November 2022 release. Speaking of unique though, they also talked about Cursed to Golf, and this is a roguelike golf game. Yeah, I don't know if I would have ever thought of this combination, but in terms of gameplay, it actually looks like it's a really nice fit where you go through 18 different courses and you have 5 shots to complete each level. The one thing about this is that it does not include randomly generated dungeons, but still a very interesting premise here. They also announced Wellfall, which has beautiful animations, though the gameplay does look quite a bit different. Kind of reminds me a little bit of something like Final Fantasy IV. This is supposed to be an independent JRPG, however. They also showed a pretty lengthy segment of gameplay for There Is No Light, and this is actually probably one of the better looking games here at this event. This is an action RPG set in a dark fantasy world. You do have that timeless pixel art, and even in terms of movement, it kind of reminds me a little bit something like Hades as an example, but this one looks pretty good and is set for a 2022 release. And here with this next one, I've seen a lot of excitement surrounding this one as well, and this would be for WrestleQuest. This one was a little unexpected, but WrestleQuest is this turn-based RPG set in the wrestling universe. It does have several licensed wrestling characters from WWE or WWF, and I mean, if you like that type of stuff, then this one might be something you'd be interested in. And then last but not least here, they also announced Void Train, which is set to release in 2022. This is some type of interdimensional game, and there's plenty of anti-gravity, and you can also bring up to 3 other friends to play with you, so if you're looking for a good cooperative game, it might be worth keeping an eye on. But there you go, that would be the entire ID at Xbox event. We did also talk about the Xbox Game Pass games in yesterday's video, but hopefully that will have got you caught back up, because I mean, this event was pretty long at around 2 hours, so hopefully I've given you a decent enough of a summary. Speaking of new game announcements though, for you horror fans out there, Supermassive Games just announced a brand new game that will be releasing later this year on June 10th. Yeah, this is only a few short months away, but Supermassive Games did announce The Quarry, and based off the trailer, it actually looks pretty interesting, especially if you like Until Dawn. Supermassive Games is the studio behind Until Dawn, which is a bit of a fan favorite over on the PlayStation 4, and here with The Quarry, I mean, this game looks very similar to that game, and there's actually a running joke right now that it's basically Until Dawn set in summer, and honestly, I think that that's a pretty accurate description here. It is once again centered around a group of teenagers going on a trip, though this time they're actually going to summer camp, and it also has a very nice supporting cast as well. You have actresses and actors such as Brenda Song from Dollface or Justin Smith from Pokemon Detective Pikachu, so this one actually looks pretty good for any of you horror fans out there. Again, it will be releasing on June 10th, and this time, the good news is that it's not just going to be exclusive to PlayStation, but it's also going to be releasing on other platforms, including PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, PC, as well as Xbox. Moving on, From Software just released a major patch for Elden Ring, which includes various bug fixes, which is always nice to see. They also balanced out several different weapons across the game, which is going to be a little disappointing to some of those people that are using overpowered builds. If you were previously using Mimic Tear or Hoarfrost Stomp as an example, both of those have been balanced out a little bit better alongside various other weapons as well. However, the most interesting part of this update, and the reason that we're talking about it today, is that it also includes new content. Now, this is nothing substantial or anything like that, but at the same time, it's always nice to get new free content compared to what you see some other publishers out there do with their games instead. However, this new content does include adding new NPC quest lines for various characters. There's also a completely new NPC altogether, being Jar Bairn, and on top of that, they also added the ability to mark quests on the map. This was actually one of the big complaints for this game, that you couldn't keep track of the various quests across the world. I mean, From Software has never really done that, but this being an open world game, it makes it a little bit more noticeable, but they fixed that problem here with allowing you to name icons on the map when you encounter an NPC, making it easier to keep track of where they are. So that's a very welcome addition right there, and really, I mean, it just makes Elden Ring even better than what it already was, and as you all know, I do consider this game to be an absolute masterpiece. Regardless, I am going to drop a link in the description below if you want to check out all of the patch notes. There was a lot of changes here, including several balance fixes, and if you want to check out and see if your build has been affected, definitely go check that out in the description below. Let's go and talk about PlayStation though, because instead of them giving out free updates like From Software here, instead they seem to be doubling down on their decision for microtransactions in Gran Turismo 7. This is actually a bit of a surprise because there was already some controversy surrounding Gran Turismo 7 since it first launched. Now, in terms of gameplay, Gran Turismo 7 is perfectly fine. In fact, I would even say that it is a great simulation racing game, and that's why it reviews so well. But the reason this game has received so much criticism among fans is because it has some pretty lucrative microtransactions involved. Now, the way they released these microtransactions has already been under scrutiny because, well, they actually released these microtransactions after the reviews took place, so critics never really got a chance to critique the microtransactions in this game. So it was a little unexpected for fans whenever they pick up this game, and then all of a sudden they launched the microtransactions, which includes some very expensive cars. Cars that cost $5 in Gran Turismo Sport, as an example, those would be $5. But now in Gran Turismo 7, well, they're $40 instead. That is an incredibly dramatic increase, and we're not talking about some free-to-play game here. No, we're talking about a premier AAA game that costs $70 on the PlayStation 5 or $60 on the PlayStation 4. Yeah, that type of stuff does not sit well with fans at all. Now, it is important to keep in mind that you can unlock all of these cars in the game completely free. You're not forced to buy the microtransactions, but that's something else that they've been scrutinized for as well, is that it takes a long time to unlock some of these cars because you don't get enough credits in the game. And it almost seems like Polyphony Digital is pushing their fans to buy these really expensive microtransactions. Yeah, I don't know if you can really call them microtransactions anymore at all. They don't really seem too micro to me, but hey, that's besides the point. Regardless, that's where they seem to have doubled down. I think for a lot of people, including myself, I mean, I was expecting Polyphony Digital to kind of backtrack a little bit when it comes to these microtransactions, make them cheaper, or instead to give better payouts for races. That way you can unlock cars faster. That is not what they did, however. In fact, the prices so far have not changed. Now, maybe they will in the future, but so far they have not changed. But interestingly enough, they pushed out a new update today that actually lowers the payout in several races. That means it's going to take even longer to unlock these cars that people are already complaining about. And again, it just seems like they're pushing you towards those microtransactions, which are just far, far too expensive. This is just not a good look at all. I mean, again, we're not talking about some free-to-play game here. We're talking about a premier AAA title, and this comes off as a very shameless update. One of the expectations with games increasing to $70 was that hope that this would do away with microtransactions, but instead here, we're seeing them double down on microtransactions. It really is just mind-blowing. And as no big surprise at all right now, the Gran Turismo community, they're not happy about this. I've been reading a lot of the commentary about this today, and people are very upset, and this includes well-known names out there, including Steve Alvarez Brown. You can actually take a look over on Twitter where he said this: "As a matter of principle, I will never do a single microtransaction ever on GT7. The game has definitely got to a point whereby it's unreasonably time-consuming for the average player to gain credits. Don't get me started on the rollout spins either. Even if you completely disregard microtransactions, the bottom line is that it takes stupid amounts of time to gain credits in the game." So this is not just some fabricated story or anything like that. The Gran Turismo community legitimately seems very upset about some of the decisions that Polyphony Digital and PlayStation are making with Gran Turismo 7. And it's such a shame. Gran Turismo 7 is actually a good game, and it just seems like Gran Turismo is back. But here we do have some poor decisions being made that has weighed down Gran Turismo 7 from reaching its full potential and just allowing fans to enjoy it for what it is rather than being pushed towards microtransactions. Ultimately, I think that this decision and update comes off as shameless, it comes off as greedy, and quite frankly, with it being a $70 game, I also think that it is quite frankly unacceptable. Let's go ahead and talk about Nintendo, though, and these quote-unquote leaks that have been passed around here recently. And I mean, there's a lot of speculation going on what all this means. Truthfully, a lot of this just doesn't amount to much. There was a controller patent being passed around. There was maybe some wonder if they were working on a new controller, but it ended up being basically the Nintendo 64 controller. You can see here it is the top part of the Nintendo 64 controller, so I don't want to go over all of that. There was also a data mine that revealed something by the name of Nintendo Switch Forward. There was some speculation out there that this Nintendo Switch Forward might be a brand new Nintendo Switch console, though I believe it was actually linked to Fortnite instead. So no, this is not a new Nintendo Switch console, so we're not going to go over that one either. But there was one interesting thing that did pop up over the last couple days, and that would be that Nintendo has renewed several trademarks for some of their beloved IP. Now, before we jump into this, the first thing that I want to kind of clear up is that there is a very, very good chance that this means absolutely nothing. This could be just business per usual, where they just simply renew their trademarks. Companies do this type of stuff all the time. So that very well could be what we're seeing here. But on the off chance that this could indeed lead to something, I thought we'd at least go over it real quick because they did renew several Game Boy Advance games. Now that right there is what's interesting because there's been a lot of rumors that Game Boy, Game Boy Color, as well as Game Boy Advance games will be heading over to Nintendo Switch Online eventually, but so far, that hasn't really amounted to anything. But here we are seeing Nintendo renew several Game Boy Advance games, and actually let's just go and take a look at the full list of trademarks here. This includes one of my favorite Zelda games actually being the Minish Cap, really just such an underappreciated Zelda game, but then also Metroid Zero Mission, Mach Rider, and Donkey Kong Country 3, Dixie Kong's Double Trouble. So we are seeing a few Game Boy Advance games here, and this has led to the speculation that maybe these trademarks are for an upcoming Game Boy Advance inclusion for Nintendo Switch Online. And I would absolutely love that to be the case because Game Boy Advance is such a phenomenal console and it has aged incredibly well. However, one thing to kind of point out here though is that Donkey Kong Country 3 is actually already available in Nintendo Switch Online, and that's why I kind of lean on the side of yeah, this is more than likely just Nintendo doing business per usual. With that said, I do believe that there's some reasons out there to believe that Nintendo might be working on a service like this to eventually head over to Nintendo Switch Online. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to happen anytime soon at all, and this is just purely speculation on my part, but with the 3DS and Wii U eShop going away, and I mean, one of the most notable parts of the eShop on those consoles was the Virtual Console. That means suddenly a lot of Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games will no longer be accessible digitally, and with that happening in 2023, Nintendo Switch Online might be a good solution to bring these games back. And for that matter, Nintendo's trying to push Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, and right now they're doing that with Sega Genesis and Nintendo 64 games, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if they add other platforms to Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack in the future. That's the thing though, because I think that there's a high chance that if Nintendo does bring Game Boy Advance games over to Nintendo Switch, I think they might release these games into the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack subscription for $50 rather than releasing it into the entry Nintendo Switch Online for $20. So on one side, it would make Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack look a little bit better, but at the same time, for those that wants it to go into the $20 service, I'm not sure if that's something that they will do. Again, though, I mean, this is all just speculation on my part, and really, it's kind of hard to predict what Nintendo will do. Nintendo has always marched to their own beat, so we'll just have to kind of wait and see how all this plays out. But, you know, again, regardless of whether or not these trademarks means anything at all, I do hope that we eventually get Game Boy Advance games on the Nintendo Switch. Let's go take a look at the poll of the day, though, and with the Xbox Indie event yesterday, I wanted to ask you all, what letter grade would you give the ID at Xbox event for March 16th of 2022? And as you can see here, 15% of you gave it an A, 45% being the majority gave it a B, 22% of you gave it a C, 7% a D, and then 11% an F. So most of you all actually seem to like this event, or at least in terms of content. That was the thing, though, because looking through the comments, a lot of you all, and I completely agree with you all in this situation, but a lot of you all did not like the format of the ID at Xbox Indie Showcase. It is an absolutely bloated event, and it is not well paced at all. There's too many breaks, there's too much commentary, and because of all of that, truthfully, I think that it really hurts the viewership. A lot of people will just stop watching because it takes them so long to actually get to the games. It's an unfortunate situation because in terms of content, there was some really good games shown here at this event. I mean, Tunic, a game that fans have been excited about for years and years, it got a surprise announcement where Tunic was not only releasing yesterday on Xbox, but it also released directly into Xbox Game Pass. That is a huge announcement, but it was buried in this mess of an event. So I really wish that they would kind of change the format for the ID at Xbox events, but they did this last year as well. So, I mean, it seems like they're pretty committed to doing an event like this. As always, I will watch these events and I will kind of give you a summary afterwards in case you didn't miss it. Hopefully that at least helps. But I wish that that wasn't a situation. I wish they would just do what Nintendo does with their indie stuff and just give us a 20-minute event. I think that that would increase the viewership pretty dramatically, and it would just make it a much more enjoyable watch. So again, I think in terms of content, this was a good event. I'd probably give it a B for content, but at the same time, because of the format, I'm going to have to take that down to at least a C-. They have got to work on that format, but I guess it is what it is. Anyways, though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget to bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.